05. We are, as you probably have paid attention to, we're trying to get more than our usual one show in a week. And right now we're actually on course for 2 or 3 a week as we try to find information and guests that are going to be helpful to you as you're out there, dealing with the pandemic and, trying to keep your business afloat or keep your business moving forward. Or like some of you, I've got many of my customers and they said they've never been busier. So, if you're serving certain pockets of the community that are really needing or demanding your services, maybe you're pleasantly busier than normal. I am going to just share here in this opening discussion something for you guys to consider. And that is, I'm going to show here in the stream. There's a great book for you to pick up. And if you haven't read this, I read this 20 years ago. I had a mentor of mine point me at this book. And it was Who Moved My Cheese? And it has to do with the fundamental concept in life and in business. Often, what feeds you today or what is your normal today, it might move or it might change, and that you need to change if you want to continue being fed or if you want to continue prospering. And it's a really quick read. I think this maybe might take you 30 minutes or maybe an hour to thumb through it. But there's a really nice story here. And I think it's going to help you maybe put into perspective what's happening. I think aside from the virus, we'll get over the virus and everything will be back to normal at some point. But the economy is going to be different for quite a while. And it's just a matter of how to evaluate what you're doing and how you're operating and what you're offering and how you're offering it to perhaps you need to do that differently on either right now in the middle of this and or on the other side of this. And so just my recommendation, check that out. And if you end up checking it out, let me know what you think. I'm all ears. All right, let me jump right into my guest. So I've got a friend of mine. He's a real estate lawyer here in South Florida. His name's Evan Rosen, and he has been practicing real estate law for some time. I'm going to have him go through that with you. Looks like I'm just reading his bio. Looks like he's been going through real estate law for the past 20 years. He's been defending a lot of people out there regarding mortgages and foreclosures and short sales and all sides of real estate law, usually out there fighting for the person that needs someone to fight for them. And I thought who better than to bring him in and give some legal perspective as it relates to mortgage protection and renter protection. And even we'll talk just a little bit about the CARES Act payroll protection for small business. And feel free, if you're out there listening, please type into the comments. Let us know where you're coming to us from. And if you have questions for Evan, please let those fly. And again, this is a little bit of a different type of guest. Evan is not from the custom integration industry or business, but I think he's going to bring a lot of value and maybe shed some light on some of these topics for you. So let's go ahead and bring in Evan. Here we go. What's up, Mr. Evan?
How are you, sir?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm hanging in there.
You dressed up for the occasion. You're looking all lawyery.
I had to dress up today.
I say, you even shaved, man. I'm proud of you. I'm sitting here unshaven, but I'm usually unshaven. So
groom a little today.
Absolutely. All right. Evan, let me jump over here to Facebook just to make sure we're actually streaming, and it looks like we are. Don't forget, if you are out there, ladies and gentlemen, like this, comment, and if you feel so inclined, like we can help some of your friends or peers, share this feed. It'll be appreciated. Evan, tell us a little bit about yourself. I always like to start with just the background story. Where'd you come from? Where'd you grow up? What'd you study? That sort of stuff.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Born and raised in Hollywood, Florida. I'm one of many lawyers in my family. My father is a longtime practicing lawyer and former judge, and grew up, eating dinners at the dinner table with my father, telling us the story of the day or the legal question of the day and seeking our non-lawyerly feedback as to what we thought was fair. And he did that a lot. I learned a lot from my dad. He was a great mentor, still is a great mentor. I started practicing law in 1997. And when the foreclosure crisis, I did litigation, civil litigation, personal injury, medical malpractice, workers' compensation. And when the foreclosure crisis came in 2008, 2009, I started getting a lot of phone calls. And there were days I was more upset at people who I thought were taking advantage of others in a bad situation. As you know, I juggled between being upset at those people versus being upset at the financial industry. So I eventually dove in. I was uncomfortable referring people after a couple bad experiences. I dove in, and before I knew it, that area of the law had taken over my practice and to some extent my life. I blogged years ago, hello, my name is Evan and I'm addicted to fighting financial institutions. It became like a 12-step, I needed help from this fight. I just got so sucked in, and I still am. I found some more balance in my life over the last few years, but
are the banks
very,
the
very
bad
into
guys? Is that a fair title or role that they play in society?
Give me that again.
I said, are the banks the bad guys?
I've told my kids as simply as I can at times that daddy fights the bad guys. And, I had to explain that I don't have a sword or a knife. It's, more verbally and over a computer. But yeah, when you think about the last go round, the bailouts and all of that stuff certainly was enough to cause people to be frustrated and upset. But then what happened after that? Where they were taking, lavish vacations and stock buybacks and trillions of dollars of bailout and almost free money at that point. And rather than helping people, they just enriched themselves. So the icing on the cake, I think deservedly, they've earned that phrase or moniker, the bad guys. Yeah. And I see it in court. Some of them are, are nice people, and some of them, I don't know if I'm not a psychiatrist, but I don't know if they were bullied as kids and this is their chance to reverse the cycle and be the bully and be dishonest and, kick someone out of their house. And I mean, very few people take joy in that, but there are some people who enjoy kicking someone out of their home. I just, God bless them. That's thankfully not me. I wouldn't want to do that in a million years.
Evan, this is a live show, so we have people commenting rapid fire here in Facebook. So I'm actually going to, on occasion as we go, put some of these up on the screen. But I've got Allison, and she says she's super excited to hear from you, Evan. How has the virus impacted your day-to-day at your practice? And are you finding yourself even busier during these times? So your principal business is fighting the banks and defending people from, I don't want to put words in your mouth. What is your normal day-to-day, and has it changed?
Yes. So I'm still really busy. I wasn't sure what to expect. We kind of scrambled the office mid-March. March 13th was a Friday. We went home that day, and I have not been back to the office since. Now, we've been cloud-based for a long time. Our software, our online data server. I haven't had a server since Ron, you and I met. It's going on 10 years now, give or take.
Yeah,
8, 10,
12 years ago.
Yeah. So there was a fairly easy transition. I do a lot of work on weekends, especially. I get out of the office, I'll go to a coffee shop, I'll park with my laptop somewhere, and I have a second screen with the iPad. And I've been mobile for a while. So that part of it was not that much of a transition. And it was a little bit for our staff. But where our core business is helping people defend against foreclosure and fight improper debt collection. So during this time, I've had a lot of calls with clients who are understandably concerned about those exact things that we already do. So we've posted 2 informational blog pieces, one explaining how it's impacting the law initially. That was more of an overview of
I'm going
state
to
and
attempt to
local
share my
procedure.
screen, see if I can
Sure.
get technology to behave and tell me if I'm sharing the right thing.
Yeah, that's the main blog page. So that second one there was the first one we did, and it broke down jurisdiction, federal, state, and local for us here in South Florida, Dade, Broward, Palm Beach. What's going on with the courts? And the push is still for cases to proceed. It is the push is for a virtual courtroom, kind of like what we're doing, Zoom based. I had a seminar. It was a Zoom conference with 241 lawyers and judges last week, and the push is on to get as much processed as possible. We don't want the virus to stop justice. There are injustices taking place that society needs our justice service system to process. So that is moving forward as best we can. There are pros and cons to that. The evidentiary hearings, I posted a link to the great cross-examination of Colonel Jessup from A Few Good Men, where Tom Cruise is using spatial distancing to crowd Colonel Jessup. The
You
pressure.
can't handle the truth. Is that
right?
the movie?
Right. Did you order the code red? And he gets right up in his face. And there's an aspect of being live that's so powerful in cross-examination that we're going to miss.
We're going to lose that virtual.
Yeah. But then there's also aspects of it that you can do a good chunk of what needs to be done virtually too. So let's not, throw out the baby with the bathwater. Let's not.
The justice system can't stop because there's a virus. And
right.
Is it fair to say that the justice system was not ready for this?
Yeah, so we talked years ago. The federal system has cameras installed in all their courthouses. They were ready and wanting to do this for a long time, but we just couldn't get over that next hurdle of actually doing it. So most courts will allow you to do telephonic appearances, but it's still pretty rare, and for good reason. I don't want my opposing counsel there live making facial expressions or nonverbal communication that I don't know about because I'm on the phone. So I never do that. But now we're going to start having to do that, and there will be some pros and cons to it. But the second blog piece that I did there, just to go back to that, was about the CARES Act. And what
I know
that
a lot of folks tuning into
do.
this are very keen to hear your take on just a number of aspects of the CARES Act.
Sure.
So I don't know if you want to use this opportunity to maybe jump into like mortgage protection.
Sure.
What's there? What's your interpretation? How are renters being protected?
Sure. The CARES Act is for that purpose. First of all, it's 335 pages. I started with good intention reading all of it, and I quickly found that huge chunks of it were for the medical industry, unemployment issues, and things that I'm not familiar with. So you'll see sentences where they'll reference another provision in a medical statute or an unemployment statute, and they'll replace certain wording. So you can't read that unless you flip over to the other statute. You don't know what in context what they're changing. So there's a fair amount of that. And eventually I just started bookmarking and reading at least the headers. And then I eventually made my way to the mortgage and eviction sections. And that's a little over 4 pages out of 335. So I think that's interesting to note out of the gate that such a small part of the CARES Act deals with housing, whether you're an owner or a tenant. And then a chunk of it deals with, it's about half of that, a page and a quarter, page and a third, deals with if you're an investor of a income property with 5 or more designed to house 5 or more families in one structure. So half of the 3 or 4 and change pages already been for really end users all that much. They're also geared towards investors. So the first thing to know about the CARES Act for this purpose is that it's only focused or applicable to people or for people that are living in a property that have a federally backed mortgage loan. Federally backed mortgage loan they define as either owned or securitized by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, or it's insured or guaranteed by the Department of Veterans Affairs, a VA loan or an FHA loan. That's pretty much it. There's a couple of other exceptions, but that's pretty much it. And the exceptions that I'm thinking of are only for tenants. There's two other exceptions where it could apply if you're living in a property that was part of a Violence Against Women Act, and there's one other small exception. So the protections are, first of all, for the great minority of people. We looked over our cases, and only 20% of our caseload would the CARES Act even apply? And then what does it do? If you're, and by the way, if you go to our blog, I walk you through step by step how to figure out, and this applies to wherever you are. Yeah, if you scroll up and go to this, click on the one that says, how does the $2 trillion CARES Act help? Right, that was it.
Click here.
Yep. And then if you scroll down, I'm going to walk you through step by step. How do I know if I have an FHA loan, a VA loan, Fannie, Freddie? I give you links, how you can look it up. We give links to the Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach public records, but there's public records online in every county I've ever looked, and we have looked in other states and other counties from time to time. So you should be able to fairly easily do a Google search if you live in some county and wherever. Type it in and type in official public records in whatever blank county, and you should find a link. You can search by your name, and you'll need to, for purposes of FHA and VA, if you don't have a copy of your note or a mortgage saved somewhere, you'll need to go online to find your mortgage. The note should not be online. It shouldn't be recorded publicly, but the mortgage will be, and the provisions that pertain to FHA and VA will be in there. But if you already have the note and mortgage in your possession or saved somewhere, you won't need that step. And then I walk through how you'll know whether it's a VA or FHA loan. And then I also walk through, there are links to find out if your loan has been securitized or purchased by Fannie or Freddie. That's easy enough. You just need the last four of your social and your name and address. So then you determine, okay, well, now does this apply? What does that do? And there's then you break off into whether or not your property is it was designed to house 1 to 4 people, or was it 5 or more? So 1 to 4, they consider a residential property, and the other they consider a residential single family, and then the other they consider a multifamily. And in a single family, if you have a Fannie, Freddie, et cetera, federally backed loan, you can ask your servicer, and I've already gotten a call where a person who's very knowledgeable as a mortgage broker called, believes he has an applicable mortgage, and he called a major servicer who already is not complying with the CARES Act. Already asked, I'm calling for the Forbearance Program, which you can make a request that they'll give you 180 days that you don't have to make a payment. And then before that 180 days expires, you can request a second 180 days. And pretty much all you need to do is just make a financial, an attestation, just a statement under penalty of perjury that I have a financial hardship caused by COVID-19. And I mean, I don't know too many people that can't say that. Most people will be able to say that under penalty of perjury with complete truth and candor, that this has affected them. And the statute references directly or indirectly, so that it's indirectly or directly affected you. So that's one of the provisions. Now, during this period, this forbearance period, there can be no extra fees, penalties, or interest other than what you're being charged otherwise. This is supposed to be for anyone, whether you're current or not. They preface this part of the statute with, regardless of the delinquency status. In
other words, if you had already not been paying it, that doesn't void you from being able to participate in the CARES Act provision.
Well, this particular forbearance provision, right? And there's the other one, the multifamily. You have to have been current as of February 1 for that provision to apply. But this one, and it's a little misleading. So I walk through this on the blog post because, okay, let's say that you were not current, and my clients already were not current. And so, okay, well, this says it applies regardless of their status. Great. Well, what applies regardless of their delinquency status? What applies is that there's forbearance, which means the bank or the servicer is forbearing any interest, penalties, or extra interest or penalties, by the way, or extra fees for the next X period of time. Okay, well, if you're in foreclosure, your loan has been accelerated, which means that there are no more payments. All payments are due now. The case law defines acceleration in one of two ways. They both mean the same thing, which is one, all my payments are due now, or the maturity date of my loan is now. It's not 30 years from now anymore. It's now. Either way, same thing. There are no more payments. So what penalties could there be for late payments when you accelerate a loan? There are no payments. By law in Florida, there can be no late fees on an accelerated loan for that very reason. So what extra protection are you getting if you're already in foreclosure? And unfortunately, it feels like nothing on that issue. Now, there is another issue that later in the statute they talk about, that there is going to be this process for these types of loans as well, that and it's only these types of loans, the single family variety, that a servicer cannot initiate a foreclosure, move for a judgment or a sale, or execute on an eviction until May 18th, 2020. They're giving 60 days from March 18th. Okay, well, let's process that very carefully. You can't file a new lawsuit for until May 18th. Okay, that's easy enough. You can't initiate a foreclosure. That's easy enough to understand. But you can't move for a judgment or a sale until May 18th. Okay, well, I can file discovery. I can have maybe a motion to compel on discovery. I can litigate the case. I just can't ask for a judgment or a sale until May 18th. There's no mention whatsoever of just foreclosure proceedings generally. So there's a well-known Latin phrase, and I'm sure I'm not going to pronounce this correctly because, as my law school professor says, none of us are conversational, speak Latin, conversationally. So, but it's expressio unius est exclusio alteris, and it's part of our blog. And it just simply means that when you mention something but don't mention something else, it's presumed the legislature did not include that something else on purpose. They very well know how to write, this does not apply, or this does apply to all foreclosure proceedings. All foreclosure proceedings are stopped until May 18th. They didn't write that. And they very easily could have, so that the Latin phrase that I read is part of a principle of statutory construction, that the mention of one thing implies the exclusion of another. So it seems at this point, and there's other guidance in the law that we already had for when you apply for a loan modification. It's the same thing. A bank can't move for judgment or sale, but they can still litigate their cases. They can still do a lot of things to get it ready for moving for judgment, but not actually move for judgment. And that's May 18th that runs out. And that's, again, only for single family. Going back now to the multifamily, you have to have been current as of February 1. And if you're a tenant, this too becomes an issue. And it's really tricky. I don't know how a tenant. So as a tenant, you can figure out who your landlord is. You should know that. You can find out from their mortgage if it's FHA or VA. And I'm not sure if either of those apply for multifamily. Certain aspects of FHA are only for lower income homeowners and first time home buyers. So I don't think that would apply for generally I think there is an exception for FHA, but generally that's not for investors. And then how do you know if it's securitized by Fannie or Freddie? Well, you would need your landlord's last 4 digits of their social, which good luck. Or you can ask them and hopefully they tell you. And that's kind of really, I think, the takeaway from all of this at this point is, if you are facing a hardship with a lender, anyone, you should pick up the phone and talk to them, or you should email. And maybe there's something that can be worked out without the need of a federal statute or a state statute. Anyway, so going back to the breakout of the multifamily properties, if you are current as of February 2020, then you can apply again for the directly or indirectly that I've been affected directly or indirectly. And then the servicer in that instance shall provide a 30-day forbearance that you can extend for an additional 30 days. So this is much less than the 180 plus a second 180 that someone might get on a single family home. And during the forbearance period, by the way, for those multifamily properties, an owner can't evict the tenant, can't charge late fees or penalties. And so the tenant protections appear to be a little better, but you have to figure out if your landlord has a federally backed mortgage loan, or if it's a loan that's covered as part of the Violence Against Women Act, or there's this other rare exception that this could apply to housing that's part of the Rural Housing Voucher Program. And for that, a landlord cannot evict until July 25th, 2020. And until then, and they can't evict for other things, but they can't evict based upon lack of payment. And then they still have to give you 30 days now, federal statute. That there's already a notice provision in Florida statutes. I'm not sure about other states. So an extra there is a scenario where the extra, they're giving you more notice than the state statute might require or your lease might require. So they have to give you 30 days notice before they evict for lack of payment.
So, Evan, question. What if your mortgage is not in the categories that you just described? What if you are, and maybe clarify, because I don't know how to speak mortgagees. So what is the type of mortgage that does not qualify for that? But yet I've heard, I want to say I've read in the news, there are some servicers or mortgage companies offering forbearance programs of different types. Can you speak to that?
Correct. Yes, sure. Gladly. That's servicer by servicer. And what we're finding is it's very vague so far. So Wells Fargo, for example, they have a provision that's just like what the CARES Act is, which is we're not going to move for judgment. Now, granted, it's a much shorter period of time. It's not 180 days. I think they give you 60. We're not going to move for a judgment or an eviction. Okay, thank you. But most of my clients, unless the trial is scheduled.
Well, I mean, what's of interest to my audience listening, I'm imagining, is can they call their mortgage company and say, there's a lot of business owners listening to this.
Sure.
This podcast or watching the show live. And they're saying, the sales have dried up or sales have frozen. And I don't know what the next, 8 weeks are going to look like. Should they be calling their mortgage companies to see if there's a program in place? And is there anything that's official, or is it just mortgage by mortgage by mortgage?
No, other than the CARES Act and maybe something in an individual state. Now, there are some provisions in other states that I've heard about. I've not read them, but I've heard about them on the news where there are moratoriums on foreclosures in other states. We don't have that in Florida. So I would recommend contacting a lawyer in your state. There are lawyers that specialize in what we do, helping people defend against foreclosure all over the country. And beyond that, I think it is a good idea to call the servicer. I think the takeaway from this, though, is you get everything in writing. So if they're going to give you some sort of and it is servicer by servicer and it's case by case to some extent, if they're going to give you some, okay, we'll waive interest for 2 months or we'll do something, you make sure you get that in an email, you get that in writing. I've had a lot of foreclosure cases where after hurricanes here in South Florida, people will call their mortgage servicer asking for some sort of a extension or whatever, help. And the servicer will say, okay, great. We have this, program where you can pay half of your payment for the next 6 months. And this is a fairly common scheme or paradigm. And person pays half. Oh, thank you. But what they don't tell you, and some of them are very astute, they just didn't read the fine print, is that your regular payments still keep accruing. So even though you're paying half and you're happy about that for the next 6 months, at the end of 6 months, you are now 3 full months behind with late fees on top of all 6 months.
And that's
accrued.
legal?
Yes.
That
Yeah,
sounds criminal.
it's horrible. So this is a forbearance program. I've seen it from so many different servicers where, oh, we're going to help you out, make your half payment, but then the fine print is you're going to come out of this thing so much worse than if you just struggled to make your payment. So
Okay. So the message
whatever
for
you
our
do,
audience is to, if they get an offer of forbearance or to the offer to pay a lower payment for X number of months, they need to make sure they're not actually building up fees or building up back due payments.
right.
Yeah. All right. So, by the way, let me give a few more shout outs. Had some more people say hello. So we've got Jamie, Breezemeister. I just had Jamie on the show not too many months ago, and Jamie's a fearless leader in our industry. Pound, we will get through this. Yeah, we will get through. Amen,
Yeah,
Jamie.
it
Thank you
will.
for that. And then I'm going to bet this is a relative of yours, Paolo Rosen. Would that
Yep.
be your wife?
Yep.
That would be your wife. You have a beautiful family. She says,
Thank you.
helping others, passionate about justice.
Yep. She's part of the team. She works part-time in the office, and she's, has as much passion as I do about this stuff.
And let me see. Nope, we already did that one. Let me do one more. We got Stephanie. She says, very excited for the show. Thanks, Evan, for coming on and sharing your insight and perspective. All right.
Pleasure.
So I'm going to ask a very narrow question. It might be self-serving. So if you own rental properties and your tenant, I'm going to say, I think you've already answered this, but I'm not very good at legalese. So I want you to help translate this for me and our audience.
Okay.
So if you own rental properties and if you have tenants, what can you do if your tenant says, I'm not going to pay you anymore? What do you do? Because you still owe the mortgage company.
Right.
I think you're telling me that if I am an FHA or if my loan has been something with securities and Freddie or Farmy or Charlie,
you got it. You're 100%.
am I getting it? Then
Perfect.
I could apply for some. What do I do if my tenant says I'm not paying you anymore, but yet my mortgage payment is still due?
Yeah. So you got the added aspect here in Dade and Broward and Palm Beach too, if I'm not mistaken. They've suspended all evictions. You can file a lawsuit, if I'm not mistaken, for an eviction, but they're not allowing sheriffs to go out and serve writs to kick people out of houses. So you, as a landlord in South Florida, are waiting in a situation where there's not a lot that anyone can do to help you. Now, if the CARES Act applies, then you have
Which you said is of your caseload is 20%. What, just macro of everyone watching, what is it like? How many of the mortgages in America fall under this CARE Act provision?
Yeah, I don't know. And I at one point it was the majority. The Fannie Freddie, they were propped up to help create the secondary mortgage market. It was the great majority of loans. And then came the securitization machine where banks started becoming their own Fannie and Freddie with the help of investors on Wall Street, pooling money together, buying a lot of loans from lenders in the secondary market. And so that lenders could then get money back and go back out and loan again. So I don't know the answer to that, but I would be surprised. I'm going to guess and say it's probably pretty similar to what my caseload is. I think my caseloads are probably a decent cross section of what's out there.
So it's that sounds rather dire, Evan. This is not good news.
No, I man, I have these conversations and then I have to throw in too, and it is a downer. And there's just I try so hard to find a positive light and a silver lining to this and to everything. And you and I have talked about I would call it self-help type stuff in the past, and the idea of what you focus on grows, what you put attention into grows, and by focusing on negative and complaining, it's not helping you at all. But we did touch base before we started the show about successful clients that I've had who don't label it, don't get caught up in emotion, don't get caught up in poor me, and they just go for it. And they're like, all right, what do I need to do to get through this and how, and I'm going to try it. And if that aspect one that I just tried, number one, doesn't work, I'm going to go to door number two, and I'm going to go to door number three if two doesn't work. And they just don't quit. Successful people have that mindset. I've seen that with certain clients. One in particular comes to mind who was facing foreclosure in '08. We helped him get through. He lost a waterfront property voluntarily. He did a short sale to get out of the litigation. Um, and here we are 10 years later, and I just read about how he closed a multi-million-dollar real estate transaction. He's a successful developer. So I think that's an important takeaway, is don't get caught up. I have friends that are doctors and surgeon in particular I spoke to yesterday. A lot of people are going through this. And so for the business owners that are on this call, the SBA program, there's a lot of information out there. Tomorrow, they begin accepting applications for the Payroll Protection Program, and you can immediately apply for the Economic Disaster Injury Loan through SBA, EDIL. There's differences between those two things. It's changing pretty regularly. Last I had seen, I think it's the EDIL that is one of the two of them is 0.5% interest. And then the other one,
the disaster loan is 0.5.
Yeah, and 2 years. And then the other one, and you could even get a $10,000 grant out of that, if I'm not mistaken. And then the other one, the PPP, that could be completely forgiven if you use the money for payroll and rent or other covered expenses. So
have you heard on the PPE, which the filing date is tomorrow. So if you're out there and you're in America and you own a business, you should be planning to either file today if you can early. Evan, you had mentioned that your bank actually was allowing applications today.
Yeah. The applications are in circulation. Whether they're processing them or not, I don't know. But I know you can complete it and send it back to your banker yesterday. They hit the press yesterday sometime, and you can fill them out and send them back. I know Iberia Bank locally was rocking and rolling already as of yesterday.
Have you heard on the payroll program what the time frame for payout? Is there any language out, or have you heard through the grapevine when businesses, actually it's a two-part question. I'm going to modify my question. Have you heard how they're going to determine who will receive a payout for payroll, and then when that payroll in fact will be paid out?
So it's a loan that you get through a SBA lender. It's not directly. The Economic Disaster Injury Loan is direct through the federal government. Treasury sends you a check. The other one, you apply for a loan, the PPP, and then the money comes to you. And you have, if I'm not mistaken, it is a max of 10-year loan. It is I think it's 4% max interest rate, 0 prepayment. And then you have no payments for 6 months. So they'll looking backward at 6 months. After 6 months is up, they'll look back and see how you spent the proceeds. And apparently, if you spent, they'll look at your books and records, and the 8 weeks post the loan disbursement, if sums expended for payroll for employees less than $100,000. And during that 8-week period, and rent, mortgage, utility, mortgage interest, I think it is, not just mortgage payment, that is then forgiven. So the SBA website does a really nice job laying that out. And I've also attended a couple webinars on this. I attended one yesterday. I didn't go very far, but I attended one yesterday. I was a lawyer in I think he's in Boca or Del Rey, who worked for the SBA for 10 or 15 years. So he had a lot of insight. But even he said it's changing regularly, and the best thing is to speak to the SBA or go to the SBA website. And this is a common theme or common aspect of these discussions. This is all unprecedented. So we're kind of, to some extent, doing our best to funnel our way through them. And that goes back to that success mindset of not letting any of that get you caught up. I have clients, why bother? They're not going to do it. and then you have the client says, I'm just gonna do everything. I'm gonna apply for everything, and then I'll figure it out, and I'll see what works and what doesn't. And if that one doesn't work, I'll reject it. I mean, that's the mindset that I've seen now during this now as we're entering a second crisis. Looking back, it's really easy to see the successful people and how they were approaching it versus the ones that just bury their heads in the sand or upset or full of complaining and negativity. Vast different in the result.
Amen. Let me put a few more comments up on the screen. Sonia, she says, thanks for the information. You're welcome, Sonia.
You're welcome.
And Brian, hey, Brian, how you doing, bud? He says, hi, Ron. Hi, Brian. There you go. And I'll go all the way back to the beginning here. Tina says, welcome to Automation Unplugged, Evan. Excited to have you on the show. Thanks, Tina, for that comment. So, Evan, audience that is listening or watching you, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you directly?
Sure, the office line or email. We can post that up or.
Yeah, let me go back here. There's your website. And you know what I'm also going to do here? I'm going to put here, see if I can get technology to behave. And there we go. I'm going to do your email, your website, and your email.
Thank you. Yeah, and the phone number is easy. If you want to call, it's 855-55 Rosen is the 800 number.
Yeah, you know what I'm going to do there? I'm going to even do one more here because I think you could help a lot of people. So there's the website. There's Evan looking all lawyery. And Evan, thanks for all that you do, buddy. You help so many people and you fight for people. And there aren't enough people like you in society. So
thanks, Ron. Ron, it's interesting how we met and the connection. And I've always sensed in your heart that you've been motivated by this cause, that there's something that's called to you about the injustice of people working hard and maybe not getting a fair shake or not having a level playing field. And I still can't figure out exactly why it is that motivates me. You and I talked about this. We had coffee a few weeks ago. Yep. But there's just something inside of me, and you have it too. And it's I guess it's a blessing. I enjoy serving and helping people, and I'm still very much addicted to funding financial institutions.
You're a masochist. What can you say? I am too. I serve my customers. Some are watching and listening now, and people ask me all the time, you must only work for the big guys. Or no, I actually don't see size of the company. I work for the people, the business owners that want to be better and they want to grow for themselves and their team and their families and their communities. And those people come in all shapes and sizes.
Sure.
Those are one-man operations up to 80-person operations, and everything in between. There's a full spectrum. Beautiful. All of those people are our clients at One Firefly. Beautiful. So it's because I think it is fun to fight for the little guy. Who else is going to do it? And they need help, just like all of us. So
yeah, thanks, man.
Good for you. And your wife, I'm going to give her the last word. She says, "Great and very informative." I agree, Paula. And I
thank you, Paula.
Meeting you. I know you offered when we had coffee. We got to get our families together.
That's right.
And I was like, we do. And then the virus hit, so we might have to wait a while.
Yeah. Yeah, so, but
after that, Evan, thank you, sir. Thanks for being on show 105.
Thank you so much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. I was going to say ladies and germs, but it's just not the right time. That's just like a terrible, it'd be a terrible joke. So I won't do that. But don't forget, if you are watching us live, to go over to your favorite podcast platform and search for Automation Unplugged. We have typically and normally we have one show coming out a week. Right now we're doing about 2 to 3 a week as we try to find content and guests that are going to be helpful to you. So definitely check us out. Share it. If you felt so compelled, leave a review. It helps in the algorithms. And let me pull that down. And then here is our contact information if you want to reach my team or myself at One Firefly. And on that note, stay safe, wash your hands. I am going to come to you on Saturday morning with another show. I actually had to reschedule it from earlier this week. Navat from Spire out of Michigan. And that's going to be a great show. Navat and his team are just doing some really amazing things to help their local communities and the industry at large get through these challenging times. So definitely be sure to check that out. And on that note, be well. Have a good rest of your week, everyone. And I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.